Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for April the 4th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Campbell, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant,
Here.
Garrett, Hawk, Hicks, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any personal orders or announcements? I believe I see some teachers and educators in the room, so we welcome them today. Would ask those of you who spend your time educating the children of Tennessee to please stand up so we can say thank you and recognize you. We have 13 bills on our calendar today. We also are going to be getting an overview of the administration budget amendment. And because I know that many people are very interested in what that contains, we're going to do that first. Also, it may impact some of our discussions down the road. So without objection, we will be going out of session. And members, your dashboard, as usual, you do have the documentation there. So first of all, I would like to, there you are, Commissioner Bryson, you're right up front, and I just am overlooking a tall person. That's difficult to do. But welcome, come forward, and we look forward to hearing about the changes that have been made to the budget with the administration's amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today, and thank you for taking time to listen to the proposed budget amendment that we had to the budget that we presented to you in February. I think you're all well aware of the gentleman sitting beside me, but I'm going to introduce them anyway because they are the rock stars of our administration budget process. First is Director of Budget Dave Thurman. And I think everybody knows David Thurman, and then Alex Schuman is also here as Assistant Budget Director as well. So if you don't mind, what I'd like to do, I'll run through this and be glad to answer whatever questions. Madam Chair Lady, if it would work for you, I've got some school safety issues at the back of the presentation. I'll go through the amendment, maybe stop there, and then move on from there after we answer questions. Would that work for you?
Commissioner, if you're comfortable with that, we will be as well.
Great. All right. Thank you. So again, thank you for being here. You should all have the amendment overview and as well as the slideshow presentation that we're going to be going through today. They're both on the FNA website. Just as a little bit of a review, our revenues continue to be strong, and we are on track to meet our revised growth estimates for the current year. However, we continue to remain cautious for FY24. As you know, the Federal Reserve continues their efforts to slow inflation, and it's not clear if those efforts will result in a soft landing or a more robust landing for our economy. Talk of recession, thankfully, has been pushed out, but some see it as still as a real concern for the FY24 budget. As a reminder, this proposed budget remains well positioned to endure economic weakness in the coming year. Our reserves are strong. Our budgeted growth rate is conservative, and we are growing the recurring budget by not spending every dollar on recurring expenditures. This amendment continues to emphasize the priorities laid out in the FY24 budget recommendation. Interesting fact of this budget is that if you look at the total dollars in this budget, they are almost identical to the total dollars we had in the previous year's budget. The difference is that we are seeing a decrease in federal funding, and we have seen a significant increase in state tax dollars. So, but otherwise, the total is almost exactly the same this year at $56.2 billion. As a reminder, the budget we introduced in February added over $3 billion to transportation, and I'll stop and thank you for your support of the transportation project. It's going to be It's going to be a project and initiative that will serve the state for decades to come, and we thank you for that. We also put $1 billion in TCATs, over $200 million for state parks upgrades, $200 million for our Strong Families Initiative, and over $400 million in tax reductions that will be specifically helpful for our small businesses. So let's begin to look at what is available. The bottom line on this particular chart is that if you take the $43 million in recurring and the $477 million in non-recurring, you see that for this budget amendment, we had available about $520 million total. The bulk of that money comes from two sources. The first is agency underspending that we estimate at about $180 million. And the second is interest earnings from the state pool investment fund of approximately $260 million. Just a quick note on the state pool investment fund and what that is all about. That is the fund that is held by the Treasury, by the state treasurer. All the funds that we are holding that we're not spending yet. For instance, capital projects that we have allocated money for, but we have not paid expenses for, get held there. As do a lot of the federal funds that have come in that have yet to be actually spent, are held in the state pool. Since interest rates have gone up and we've had a significant amount of money in those two items, federal funds and capital, we've seen significant growth in our interest this year, and that's why we have $260 million available in the general fund from interest on that money that we are holding. The first real initiative I'd like to get into on the budget is, once again, is transportation. I'd like to talk about air transportation, our airports. They drive much of the economic activity in our state. As discussed last year, the aviation fuel tax is insufficient to maintain, much less improve, our 78 public use air facilities and infrastructure. As a result, we are again recommending additional funding to support our big 5 airports and our 73 general aviation airports. For the 5 major airports, that's the first column on the left here, we propose $59.5 million added to the $26.3 million estimated to be collected from the aviation fuel tax and approximately $45 million in federal funding. These sources will provide over $130 million to the 5 major airports, doubling the $66 million that was provided last year. Studies have shown that the general aviation airports need $50 million in recurring funding for capital maintenance. So if you can see in the middle column, we are recommending $50 million for the general aviation airports. This would fully fund the capital maintenance for these airports with $23.7 million from the general fund and $26 million from federal funds. We recognize the important part these airports play in our robust economy, and this funding should provide the dollars needed to help meet the growing needs of our state. The Knoxville Pedestrian Bridge is the final column here, is a long dreamed of project by the University of Tennessee and the city of Knoxville. This $70 million project will be a collaboration between the state, the city, and the university and the federal government to build a bridge across the Tennessee River that will activate an entire neighborhood and provide needed access to the healthcare is one of the most important industries in our state, and we have some changes to programs, and in a moment we'll talk about the industry itself. Coming out of the pandemic, there have been a lot of challenges to this healthcare system. Let's start with some changes in 3 programs. We recommend adding state funds to replace 2 federal grants that the state will no longer draw down. Doing so, we believe, will strengthen our Department of Health's ability to manage these important programs and provide needed resources to our citizens. Funding our HIV testing, surveillance, and education programs will allow the program to be more efficient by providing upfront funding to organizations instead of back-end payments using an expense reimbursement model. These grants are provided to Metro Health departments as well as other community partners. In addition, the second item here, the state will no longer receive federal Title X funding to support family planning services. The $9.3 million you see here will replace the loss of federal funding, but retain the services to our citizens. Both of these federal grants will end this fiscal year, so supplemental funding is included to complete this fiscal year and go into recurring funding for the next fiscal year. Finally, the Ryan White program provides direct treatment services as well as insurance premium support to people living with HIV/AIDS. The program has experienced steady growth over the last several years, and this funding will allow the department to continue to provide this needed service. There's been a lot of discussion about our hospitals, our behavioral health facilities, and our nursing homes, and so I want to get into that a little bit and how we work with them. The problem is particularly acute related to staffing. So we are also recommending additional funding to support our healthcare providers in 3 major sectors. Related to hospitals, as you recall, last year's budget replaced all CPE, Certified Public Expenditure reimbursements in our TennCare budget, allowing all of our public hospitals to claim and retain that funding directly. A small portion of that CPE was funded from the hospital assessment bill that you all pass annually. We are proposing to buy back that portion of the CPE so that the assessment funds will no longer be needed for this purpose. Doing so will free up funds to be used to provide direct support to hospitals at a time when the majority of Tennessee's hospitals are experiencing significant financial challenges. Buying back these funds will allow this $9.5 million, the hospitals to retrieve the $9.5 million, plow them back into their assessments, and potentially be matched by the federal government to triple the value of this number of this investment. Second, on behavioral health, we recommend recurring funding to support a rate increase for our behavioral health providers, particularly those this is for TennCare providers. This will strengthen our mental health crisis services and support our housing and residential treatment centers across the state. This $3.3 million will leverage almost $7 million in federal match for a $10 million in total support. We also recognize that the 5 children's hospitals in our state are limited in their ability to provide crisis stabilization services specifically for children with behavioral health concerns. To address this, we are proposing to fund $10 million in grants to enable the 5 children's hospitals to build out the infrastructure they need to better serve children with behavioral health issues. At the same time, we are recommending $5 million to establish and support 2 first-year standalone crisis stabilization centers specifically for children. Sorry, I got distracted by the coffee. This will divert children. This will divert children away from hospitals and allow them to provide better services for the child. We propose to fund both of these infrastructure grants over the next 2 years. We've heard a lot about nursing homes, especially coming out of the pandemic, and the challenges that nursing homes are facing. And we recognize that there is a financial strain on this industry. Therefore, we agreed with the nursing home industry to increase their assessment to draw down another $66 million in funds from the federal government. Additionally, we recommend providing $50 million to nursing homes over the next 2 years to help stabilize their operations and provide support as they make structural changes to right-size their operations and address the changing market conditions. $33 million of the $50 million would be available in FY24, and we propose a step-down level of funding in year 2 of $17 million. With the increased assessment match and these stability funds, nursing homes will have access to an additional $182 million over the next 2 years, in addition to an automatic provider rate increase from TennCare. There's always something about education in the budget, so let's talk for just a moment about education. As you will remember, last year's budget provided one-time grants to middle schools and high schools for CTE programming. $500,000 went to middle schools and $1 million went to high schools. There were 58 schools across the state that are mixed with middle and high schools. Each of those schools last year received $500,000. We believe that they should receive the funding as a high school rather than a middle school. Therefore, for those 58 schools, we are proposing an additional $500,000 for each school so that their funding will be total of $1 million per school from last year and this year's budget. That will be a total of $29 million to fund those grants. We also recommend funding to provide additional tutoring services to K through 3 students in English language arts. And I want to really express my appreciation, our appreciation for the work of the General Assembly in creating these tutoring programs. Charter schools serve as educational laboratories, and that is the last item on this page. Some of these charter schools are very high performing. The state must ensure that we learn from these high performance school models and replicate best practices across all public schools. Fund grantees will work with the Department of Education to promote successful practices for public schools. This work was previously funded through the Federal Charter Schools Program Grant. That funding is slated to be cut by the Biden administration. As a result, we are proposing a non-recurring $3 million to help with that transition. This is probably a good place to mention that we have not included a budget improvement for the Tennessee Early Intervention Program that is managed by DIDD. After reviewing a potential program expansion to 5-year-olds with the department, we have determined that they already have sufficient funding and positions for any program expansion that may occur in FY24, in the upcoming fiscal year. We have a couple of points here on correction. When the budget came out, the Department of Correction was in the middle of some contract renewals, and because of timing, we did not have increased costs for behavioral health, medical, and pharmacy in the original budget. So we have included it in the amendment for a total of $13.5 million. We are also proposing to fund a new violent crime intensive intervention unit pilot. This is an evidence-based approach to address individuals that need additional services beyond existing programs in our prisons. The pilot program will be established at a prison that has not yet been determined. Other states have had success with similar programs. One such state is Minnesota. Minnesota reduced recidivism by 28%, reduced the rate of rearrest by 26%, and had a 42% reduction in reconviction. The South Central Correctional Facility has been working closely. The Department of Correction has been working with CoreCivic on the operating contract for this facility, and the additional $3 million will enable the department to renew that contract and keep that facility operating. However, it does need some improvements, and that's the last line on here, capital improvements for that facility. The $20.6 million will fund 3 new projects, including to replace and upgrade the HVAC systems and the next phase of water piping in the facility. These infrastructure improvements are necessary if we're going to continue operating this prison. Since we're talking about capital, we'll just run through some of the capital items in the amendment. We've already talked about correction. We also have a $10 million request here for state parks. That is a $4 million fund to restore the historic bathhouse at Booker T. Washington State Park, and $6 million to be used to repair tornado damage at Reelfoot Lake State Park that occurred in the December 2021 tornado that, as you may remember, crossed Reelfoot Lake and ended up practically destroying the town of Mayfield, Kentucky. And so we want to replace these structures. We hope to get the reimbursements back from the federal government and our state insurance programs for these funds. We are also recommending funds to construct a new visitor center at the Sabine Hill State Historic Site. Currently, there are no restroom facilities, exhibit space, or space for staff offices. Having a visitor center on site will offer interpretive exhibits and school tours to the public while also generating revenues for operations. This is the #1 request of the State Historical Commission. We are also recommending adding $4.2 million to the TBI lab expansion project in Jackson to recognize cost escalation there. As you are very well aware, a few years ago, we built a new library and archives. The beautiful new facility sits right on Bicentennial Mall and serves the state well. The old building sits adjacent to the Supreme Court building and needs to be renovated. So we are recommending $7.3 million to begin the planning and design to renovate the old library and archives and the Supreme Court building so that those can be ready and more useful for our justice system. The West Tennessee Veterans Cemetery will be at full capacity and unable to accept more veteran burials by 2026. The $2.25 million that you see here is the state's 10% match for federal funds to purchase and build new cemetery property so that we can have 48 additional burial plots for veterans and we don't run out of space for our veterans. The next section that I have is school safety, and I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about that. Madam Chair Lady, if it is okay with you, maybe we'll stop and take questions about this first part.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. And you just mentioned the $2,258,000 that is the state match for purchase of property to expand the West Tennessee Veterans Cemetery. And how many plots did you say that will?
4,800.
Okay, thank you. For some reason, my brain heard 48, and I was not going to understand
Those have been
that.
expensive plots.
Yes. All right. Do I have questions for the Commissioner? Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Team, for being here today. I just had a couple questions regarding the subject matter you've already covered. Could you explain to me why a vast difference in how we fund airports now as compared, or in this proposal, as compared to how we've done it in the past, and why you believe reoccurring revenue in excess of $100 million is the way to go versus continuing the 10-year-old tradition of non-recurring revenues for this, and how the impact of the House bill that is traveling that caps the fuel tax over an incremental time. Could you share with me? I'm having a hard time getting from Memphis to Mountain City, the difference between the two ideas.
There's a lot of things in that question, Mr. Chairman. Let me try to address the best I can. If I don't hit them all, we'll come back. So what we've done in this is we've taken the fuel tax that previously was split between these two. We've taken all of that, since most of that, not all, but most of that is generated at the 5 major airports. And we've moved it into that category and then replaced that funding with general fund dollars. So the dollars are the same we would have done otherwise. They're just in little bit different places, if that makes sense. And so, and related to that, we have a $2.6 million set aside for the fuel bill that is coming through the legislature now. To answer that question, we've got that set aside so that we can replace that funding in here and make it whole. So we do have that here. One of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that our airports, when you look at the economic impact of our airports, it's off the chart compared to what they cost to some degree. And so we're trying to make sure that we keep them healthy, and so that people continue to use our airports and create economic impact. One of the ways we do that is we give them not only funding, but we give them regular funding, because when they have regular funding, they're able to do things like bonds and other things that they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And so that's one of the reasons why we're looking at doing it this way.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. I agree. Regular funding is ideal in that instance. But as we look at how they plan for their budgets, usually in the past, what has happened is we're using the non-recurring revenue that we send to the airports for them to allow those 10%, 90% clawback from federal aviation dollars, which allows them to do that, which is why we limited it to 20, 25, one time, I think $40 million in an entity, because we knew they were going to claw back a multiplier of that. In so doing this, it really doesn't take into consideration what the actual growth of those monies would be over time. I guess that's why I'm concerned, because when we make these commitments with non-recurring revenue, it's very difficult to get those resources back. And it would be difficult for me to understand why we do that when I've had an opportunity to be in Memphis Airport, Knoxville Airport, Nashville Airport, all these airports. They don't seem to be struggling for resources or volume or traffic. And so to take this kind of exponential increase in overall revenue and make it recurring just seems like it's not gradual enough in my opinion. So how would you alleviate my concerns as it relates to that?
Well, I think when it's a judgment call on whether how gradual it is or not. And so, but what I know that we're doing is we're trying to fund the airports. There's two pieces here, and I think you're focused on the 5 major airports. The general aviation airports, this is an amount that a study has shown that we need to do to help them, and they obviously don't have the fee structure that the 5 commercial airports do. The 5 commercial airports are continuing to grow, and they're continuing to expand the way they could be, and we have to have those facilities in place if we're going to get the airlines and the others to take up the gates. In order, they've got to be able, the gates have to be there so the airlines will come, and the facilities have to be there. And so these are just to help them with those capital costs. So it's more than we've done in the past, absolutely, but our airports are also doing far more volume than they've ever done.
Thank you. I won't belabor the point, but I look forward to discussing this further with you after the committee. Thank you.
While we're on this particular slide, can we talk a little bit about the Knoxville Pedestrian Bridge Grant? I believe you said this was a collaborative effort between the city of Knoxville, the federal government, and state government. So I'm just wondering what sort of gold this bridge is going to be made out of if our share is 20 million and we have all these other partners. Could you just tell us a little bit more about the total funding cost and then exactly what this bridge is the impact that the bridge is going to have?
Right. This bridge goes from the University of Tennessee campus across the Tennessee River to the other, obviously to the other side. And it's kind of as I understand it, it's kind of an industrial place over there, and it's going to activate that part of the city. And allow it to connect to the UT campus. It's about a $70 million total, including the land acquisition that needs to happen. UT has already committed to the land acquisition and is taking care of that. And then we have the city of Knoxville and UT and the federal government that are all going to be partners in this project.
All right. I just didn't realize a pedestrian bridge would cost me $70 million. That's kind of eye-opening. Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Really appreciate it. While we're on the topic of airports, I was curious what are the 5 major airports that this slide refers to?
It'd be I'm going to miss one probably. Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Tri-City.
And it looks like the general aviation support, we have one in Sumner County. I assume that's the smaller, more regional airports.
That's correct. Well, yeah, they handle general aviation. Actually, I think 3 of the 5 airports actually have a general aviation component also.
Good deal. And do you see these airports as a critical asset of the state in order for the state to continue to fund them to attract the tourism, et cetera, that we have here in the state of Tennessee?
I think there's no doubt that we get so much tourism through these airports, and we really need to keep them healthy and functioning and growing.
Do you see any reason why the state would not continue their support for all the airports in the state of Tennessee as they have been in the past?
None whatsoever, and that's why we've provided significant support in this amendment.
Good deal. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Lady Commissioner. Thank you all. On 6, at the healthcare support, where we're foregoing federal allocation for HIV surveillance, Title X grant programs, as well as the Ryan White program, are we foregoing that $10 million as well?
I believe that's an expansion of the program.
That's an expansion.
Is that right?
Now, back to the other 2.
Yes.
Back to the other 2. Why are we foregoing those dollars and then the state will reinvest those dollars?
The first one, the HIV surveillance and prevention program, what that we're going to be able to do is put more money into this program and actually have a better program in the sense that we're going to be able to grant money as opposed to getting reimbursements. And the Title X grant program, that's actually a program that the federal government is taking away, but we believe that it's important, and so we want to fund it from the state with state dollars.
Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. On 9, at the violent crime, let's see, let's get to that one. You mentioned $5 million in an intervention unit pilot program,
Mhm.
and you mentioned where you pretty much come up with an idea where another state was so successful with their program. And you mentioned something about recidivism.
Mhm.
What was the recidivism?
I don't know what their recidivism number was. I can tell
Yes.
you that it decreased, it was reduced their recidivism by 28%. What the base number was, I don't have with me, but we can try to find that.
Representative Miller?
So the question is, what type of financial support or investment did they make in that program? Because it sounds as if it was pretty successful.
And I don't, that's a good question, Representative Miller, and I don't know, but we can try to find out more about that. I don't have that in my notes, and it was another state.
And and I was just saying that if they're that successful, and depending upon what kind of resources and funding they put behind that,
Mhm.
uh, how did we arrive at a $5 million investment as opposed to a 7 or a 10 or whatever to
Yeah,
get
those-
a better results?
It's a good question. I appreciate that. The department came to us with this, something that they wanted to do because they've seen it be successful in other places. And they said, we need $5 million to do this pilot. And so that we can track, and they'll track the results and be able to tell if the pilot is something we should continue or not.
Thank you, Madam
Right.
Chair. Thank you, Commissioner.
Leader Camper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, are we on the schedule or should I wait and he go back in and I can ask a question about that? Or just deal with what we have here?
If you would, we will answer questions about what he's presented. Then we have another presentation, and then we can ask questions about the schedule at the end of that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Commissioner, I don't see any further questions on this portion of your presentation, so let's continue over to the school safety initiatives.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. School safety is obviously an issue everybody cares about. It's not a new initiative. In fact, going back and looking at the data, the state has had school safety initiatives of some kind for 6 of the last 7 years, totaling nearly $500 million. Now, however, last week's tragedy in Nashville reinforced the need to review and update our budget recommendations in our effort to keep our children safe. Thank you. As you may recall, we proposed significant school safety initiatives in our budget presentation in February, so I'm going to start with that. Last June, Governor Lee issued Executive Order 97, directing the administration to study the after-action reports of past school shootings to examine what went wrong and what went right. Over the next 10 months, the governor, multiple state agencies, educators, and local law enforcement collaborated and identified best practices, 2 of which were included in the budget presented earlier this year. The nearly $50 million investment included school safety grants of $20 million for individualized school safety upgrades and $30 million for Homeland Security agents in every Tennessee county. The school safety grants are fairly straightforward. Be glad to answer any questions about those. But let me talk for a moment about the school safety initiative, which places Homeland Security agents in every county. School safety is an ecosystem involving multiple organizations with specific areas of expertise. Each component of the ecosystem must work together to protect students in the school and to prevent future attacks. Each member of this ecosystem is committed to safe schools. However, the training, preparation, and ability to execute varies widely across the state. Homeland Security agents are specifically trained to assess schools, assess and remove risks, and coordinate local assets to effectively protect the school and prevent future tragedies. These agents will be local, on the ground, working with local communities and schools every day. We must ensure school safety is complete. Of the thousands of school safety assessments completed by schools each year, Homeland Security is only able to review and assist on roughly 130 of them. Our schools deserve better. Under this plan, each K through 12 school will participate in a security assessment each year with their Homeland Security agent. Homeland Security agents will also assist with security assessments at private schools. It is also important to note that these agents are also trained to conduct investigations on reported threats and to coordinate with the school-based behavioral liaisons. So that gets us to the proposed additional funding and proposals for this amendment. This amendment builds on the budget recommendations made in February to provide a more comprehensive plan that builds on best practices to engage school security, local law enforcement, and behavioral health professionals. First, we propose $7 million to expand the school safety grants to non-public schools. Second, $140 million is allocated to provide the funds to place a full-time HRO in all 1,863 public schools in Tennessee. Third, we propose to double existing funding for school-based behavioral health liaisons by adding $8 million to fund 114 positions. This will ensure that every Tennessee county has one or more school-based behavioral health liaisons to provide face-to-face consultation, training, and education for teachers to enhance learning environments for children who are at risk for serious emotional disturbance, behavioral problems, or substance abuse disorders. Liaisons also serve as a link between the school and the child's family. These 5 programs total well over $200 million in additional funding and make a major step forward in securing our schools and protecting our children. Madam Chair Lady, you all have heard a lot about these proposals, and so I'm going to stop here and allow you to ask whatever questions that you may have, and we will do our best to answer them.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you've referenced, we have had a lot of conversation about this, but I'm sure that people do have questions. And I'm going to begin on the school safety, the budget regarding the school safety grants on that slide. Can you talk to us a little bit about what kinds of things the grants would cover?
The grants are fairly open. They were originally designed and for really hardware security and make sure that the schools have the kinds of locks and doors and those types of things that they need. I believe the grants can also be used for other items and other expenses related to school security. These are grants, so they will be made for these schools to use them as they need to.
So for instance, some of us have seen a number of presentations by vendors that provide technology that helps to improve school safety, technology that would allow an SRO or a guard to see a panel and know if a door is opened or closed, because we have people doing patrols, but that patrol is only good for as long as the guard is there. As soon as he leaves, the door could be open and you wouldn't know. So that kind of technology, would these grants be allowable to use for the purchase of that sort of thing?
To my knowledge, they would be. I don't know how detailed the actual applications or the criteria have gotten at this point, but to my knowledge, they might be.
All right, thank you. I think it's important that we continue to not only look at hardware and people's security, but there's a lot of things that technology can do for us too, that hopefully with requiring fewer personnel resources. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. And I need you to clear up something for me, because this is just something I heard and I don't know whether it's true or not, but do the different departments of schools across the state, do they have the choice of using these grants for school safety, or could they use them for some other reason? Do they have a choice in the matter, or do it have to be only for school safety?
They would have to be used for school safety. There are 2 grant programs here, and one is the original school safety grants that are used for school safety, as we were just discussing, and the others are the SRO grants, which have to be used for SROs and related expenses.
Madam Chair.
Representative Shaw.
You are sure that they could not use them for any other administrative like hiring extra staff and things like that, they are used. I just want to make sure that they are used specifically for school safety.
That's correct, Representative
All
Shaw.
right, thank you.
And Commissioner, while we're talking about the grants again, they have other questions on other areas, but are these grants going to be competitive?
Yeah, well, they are grants they have to apply for. So I assume there's only going to be a limited number. I don't know exactly how they're going to be chosen at this point. We can get you more information on how that's going to be rolled out.
All right, and another issue that we have had, and I know there's a lot of money that's been floating around, and sometimes it's difficult to get money out the door. But do we have any kind of timeline on how long it will be from inception of the grant and approval to actually how long this whole process is going to take before the schools would actually see the money? And is the money a reimbursement or is it an upfront grant?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and I don't have the answer to that except to say that this is a high priority item. And so I would not expect this to be a long-term issue.
And is it upfront or are the grants to be given on a reimbursable basis?
My understanding is they're all upfront. You know? All right. Yes.
Thank you. Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner. To follow up on I guess the why, are you at all concerned about creating a new level of SRO management bureaucracy in regards to Homeland Security now operating in 95 counties who are not members of the community currently or not helping with active shooter training and not relationally involved at all with what's going on in school safety in our communities now?
Are you speaking to the Homeland Security agents or to the SROs?
No, I'm communicating in regards to the 122 positions with the Homeland Security agents who currently do not exist in the state.
Right. There's always a concern when we do something like this, but the truth is that this was actually designed after about a 10-month study of best practices across the country and states everywhere. And one of the number one recommendations was that there was a need for coordination of all of these different activities in the community so that everybody kind of knows what everybody else is doing and everybody is on the same page. And there's a lot of that is needed in a community. There's also training that is needed to be standardized across the state. Some communities have excellent training and some don't have training that is quite as good. And so there are a lot of those things, those types of activities. If you'd like to know more about what they do, I know we've got the Department of Safety here and they can actually give you a more robust answer than that. But I do know that this was one of the recommendations that came out of a 10-month study about how do we address best practices for school safety.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. I get that. They came and testified at their budget hearings this year to the full committee, and that was a question that I had for them. The difference now is that we're adding 1,800 new SROs across the state with this appropriations amendment, which I think we should do, which I'm thankful that we're able to do.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that we're going to choke the system with all this new, and when in fact it might have been better to roll, 1,600 new SROs in with the monies regarding those SROs and wait on the Homeland Security next year, particularly in communities like mine where all the SROs are managed by one law enforcement agency, the sheriff's office, where there's an MOU with the school system, and that's the case, where they're certified to train their own people as it relates to active shooter training. And then you would have other instances like in Shelby County where you have multiple agencies where the same single person for Homeland Security is going to help assist every LEA and every law enforcement agency in Shelby County that you would have one in Putnam County. It just seems to me like that there might be some issues of coverage or the inability where that Homeland Security agent, it may take them 10 years to see every student and effectuate the change in Shelby County, and it might take 10 weeks in Putnam County.
I think, and there's no doubt that some of these Homeland Security agents will be working in other, across counties as well. So if you're talking about Shelby County, there may have, agents from other counties that will be assisting in some of those schools and areas, to make sure that they do it right and do it the best job that they possibly can.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And he actually hit square on what my concern is. Spot on. So I guess what I would say is, or ask or request, is that you all continue to study this. So you know, a 10-month evaluation sounds good, but as implemented, you're going to find that, as he said, dealing with the county like Shelby County, or even like, you know, much smaller, but still complicated county like Knox, is a little different than dealing with Union County, where you got one high school, 2 middles, and 4 elementary schools. I mean, so it's the person that you hire for that type of situation might not be the same type person that can come into a Shelby, you know, like coming from a Tipton down to a Shelby. That's just, it's apples to oranges in terms of congestion, and they both have unique needs, and they both are extremely at risk, as we've seen. So, but it's just different. So I would just ask that we continue to evaluate this, because, you know, at first blush, it doesn't seem like to be the best model, but as you say, you have studied it. So if you could comment on that.
Madam Chair, would it be helpful to have Greg Mays from the Department of Homeland Security come and address these questions in some more detail?
We can do that. If he would come forward, I would ask that both if you want to give us a quick overview, and that would be quick, and that we would get on with our questions, because we have a number of questions and we do have bills to consider. So if you would come forward, introduce yourself, and maybe you could just respond to the general questions that have already been out there, and we can ask if there are any other more specific ones of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Greg Mays. I'm the Director of Tennessee's Office of Homeland Security. And thank you for the opportunity to kind of clear up maybe what are some misconceptions about what Homeland Security's role will be here. I think, first of all, let me say that Homeland Security in each county will not be managing SROs. There are two separate and very essential roles to be played. SROs are usually provided by the county sheriff. Sometimes it's a police department. Sometimes they're school safety officers in a little bit different category. They are being well managed by many sheriffs across the state, and they're doing a great job in each individual school. And the grant, the $140 million grant, has to do with making sure that every school has an SRO. And I fully support that as a great idea. And it's incredibly important. The Homeland Security agents have a bit of a different role. It involves threat assessment. We don't want to deal with someone with a gun at the door to the school. I don't want the SRO to have to deal with it right there. The Homeland Security agent will be looking at threats against schools in the entire county and going out and trying to address the threat before it gets to the school. There have been numerous studies on school security. FBI, Secret Service have done some. One of the key studies in 2018, a report was released on an operational guide for school security. It's done by the National Threat Assessment Center. One of the key recommendations there, the number one on the list, was that every school or school district should have a multidisciplinary threat assessment team made up of mental health, guidance counselors, educators, SROs, and someone to bring it all together and to take a look at the threats that are facing the schools. We know that almost every school shooter, in fact, everyone I've ever studied or looked at, has demonstrated pre-attack behaviors leading up to the shooting. It's critically important that we pick up on those pre-attack behaviors, and that we go out and do some interviews and try to get that person off that pathway to violence. Homeland Security in Tennessee has been doing that. At least since 2018, we have something called the SafeTN app, where anyone in the community, but particularly kids in schools, can report threatening behavior. They can report suicidal ideations. They can report anything that's uncomfortable to them on this app, and it comes to Homeland Security. And we work with the SROs in each school, and we work with local juvenile courts, and we work as best we can to get out there and mitigate that threat before it gets to the school. Right now, we're doing the best we can in the state, and I've got, there's a total of 18 Homeland Security agents, including me. There's actually about 14 across 95 counties. And that's just not enough to address the threats that are out there. And that's part of what this Homeland Security agent in every county is designed to do. I think some of the concerns you have are right on, particularly about being a part of the community. It's essential that we be a part of the community, that we partner closely with the sheriffs and the schools in the county. And that's why we need an agent in every county. Now, they're not bound by the boundaries, by the borders of the county. They can move back and forth in the regions and help out each other. But it's essential that we be there and develop that sense of trust with the local community. But school security is not all that Homeland Security will do, of course. Well, let me make one more important point. The school assessments in 2018 are coming out of the Governor Haslam's school security group recommendations. The Tennessee Office of Homeland Security created a school assessment, like a checklist. Think of it as a checklist that the Department of Education sends to every school, every K through 12 public school in the state. There's 1,863 public schools. And this long and involved checklist it's a self-assessment where the school can go out and take a look at their own security. And then the Office of Homeland Security comes behind that and periodically evaluates some of them. It's not to offer solutions and help and expert recommendations. Last year we were able to do 30 out of 1,860, and I think this year we've done 139 of the schools out of 1,860. With these new positions, we will eventually work up to be able to do all of them, so that so that the SRO and the principal of the school, as they're looking at each of these assessments, will have the Office of Homeland Security and our dedicated expertise along with them in a collaborative, work together environment. That is my pledge to all of you, and as I've mentioned to the administration also, that's where these positions are most essential. And then finally, I'll say that school security is not all that Homeland Security will be handling. There are many other threats to the Tennessee homeland that come in many different forms, from both the domestic foreign terrorist organizations, some nation state interest, many different things that we are looking at. And on these Homeland Security agents will be able to assist with all of those issues as well. So I hope that helps, and I'm certainly open to answer any questions. Thank you.
Chair, Representative Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry I was throwing you off there with the hand signals and all that. I have a question about how does the behavioral health liaisons intersect with the SRO and the Homeland Security agent? Because I think mental health is a key component in what we're faced with here. So kind of give me and the committee a summary of how all that's going to kind of tie together and not, like Representative Williams was saying, become such a bureaucratic process that it's ineffective. So help me understand that.
Thank you for the question, Representative Gant. We've already started working together with Commissioner Williams and sitting behind me. The school-based behavioral health liaisons and Homeland Security are already beginning to work together as our role in school security has expanded. We've done some training and some meetings with them. The 14 Homeland Security agents I have now, as I mentioned, I've asked each and every one of them to make contact with the school-based behavioral health liaisons in every county. And part of the study I mentioned, the Secret Service INTAC study, National Threat Assessment Center study, talked about these multidisciplinary threat assessment teams. And so school-based behavioral health liaisons and homeland agents and SROs and educators all need to come together to identify the problems and to recommend a best course of action. So I believe the mental health component of the school shootings that our nation has experienced is a critical component. And it's important that we work together with them, and we've already started that.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. I don't see any further questions for Homeland Security.
Parkinson too.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was in regards to the Homeland Security agents, will their role also be supporting the SROs and schools in relation to possible gang activities in the schools?
Yes, sir. I think any threat to the school, if a shooting occurs at a school and it's due to, say, a gang activity versus a targeted violence activity, both of those are horrible. And any threat to the school, the Homeland Security agent would work closely with the SRO and any other law enforcement agency, a gang task force, whatever is necessary to prevent that violence from happening.
Representative Parkinson, you have one follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair, lady. And my follow-up would be also, would that officer or that individual that's representing Homeland Security also have a role in regards to colleges and universities, specifically HBCUs that were facing threats in the past few years? Wouldn't they have a role in that also?
The short answer is yes. The grant money, and the Commissioner can correct me if I'm wrong, but does not go to higher education. But currently, Homeland Security, when requested to support both private schools and higher education, including HBCUs, we always say yes and do the best we can to provide them all the support we can.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. How many responses or inquiries or actions did your current, I think you said 18 current folks, how many did they respond to last year in the same manner that you're proposing the other 122 would do this year? I know you can't see me, but you can possibly hear me. I've got the...
Yes, sir. I don't have an exact number. I can get that to you. Our responses, let me give you a little amplifying information. Our responses really would be those that I think you're asking about our direct response. An agent actually goes out into the field and does a response. I'll get those numbers to you. Last I checked, we were somewhere around 80 cases this year, but it's been a while since I checked. I'll get the number to you.
Thank you. So the main purpose of these new agents would be to act as a possible surveilling agency to oversee mental health and SROs and what might be going on in social media or text messages. Or I'm just wondering if you're gathering all your information from an SRO or you're gathering your information from the mental health entities at the school, what other means by which add value by having your agency serve in this fashion?
Thank you for the question. A good way to answer that might be to illustrate by example. A typical case might come in where there's a social media post. So-and-so is going to bring a gun to school tomorrow. A particular school is mentioned, going to kill people. The social media post begins to get circulated, and the SRO becomes aware of it. But it's difficult to find out just from looking at the phone, where did it originate? Oftentimes there's a civil a warrant or court order needs to be determined to serve the provider so we can find out who posted it. Sometimes we know. There was a case yesterday where we were able to just identify the person based off of their email ID or whatever. But sometimes Homeland Security will be able to help with those processes. We do a lot of search warrant writing, process writing, take it to the judge, serve Google or Facebook or whoever, Instagram, with the process so we can get subscriber information. That's one way we can help, because remember, the SRO is at the school and he's got this threat going on, and then he's got 2 or 3 other things going on, and he really doesn't need to leave the school to go write a search warrant. There's multiple things happening, so we can come in and help there. Now, once we've identified a person that's made this post, certain things need to happen, right? We need to determine quickly, is it a credible threat? Is there capability and intent to do harm here? Or is this just a posting to get out of school for the day? So that's where we bring the mental health in, education in. They may already know this person, and that's a huge help there, where this person this student, for example, is experiencing multiple life stressors. They're moving towards a feeling of desperation. They got a difficult home life. These are things we need to know, and we all need to meet and come together and say, what is the best course of action? Does this kid have access to firearms? And then the kid needs to be interviewed. We need to find out, we need to get at quickly whether he really intends to bring a gun to school tomorrow or not, because the principal may be wanting to shut down the school. There are a lot of consequences to take place here. That is a lot to put on an SRO at a school who really doesn't need to leave the school because he's got so many other things going on. And this is where Homeland Security can really add value, particularly if they're there, they can respond quickly and work as a team to resolve this. These cases have to move pretty quickly. We can't wait around till Monday or next week to get it done. And we think we can really be a force multiplier there.
All right, we are going back, and I have a number of questioners for Commissioner Bryson, so we will continue with those, beginning with Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've got a few questions, but I just go back and forth. Thank you. Commissioner, I know we're short on time, so I'm just going to rapid fire. And forgive me if I missed this. The $140 million for SROs for public schools, is that simply divided among the 1,800 public schools evenly?
Yeah, I believe those grants will be for approximately $75,000 each to put one SRO in each of the 1,863 schools.
And so for those schools, specifically Knox County, we have an SRO in each school, but there are many schools we need an additional SRO. So we're not penalized for having one. We still receive the 70, and they can use that for an additional.
That's right. And if they already have an SRO, they can still apply for one to get one in that school, and they could either have two or they would have a savings, obviously, on their budget.
Okay, great. And then, Madam Chair, one more related to the $7 million for the non-public schools. Because there are so many private schools, very, very small entities, has there been any conversation or thought related to only accredited private schools qualifying to ensure we maximize that $7 million? Because those are typically the larger schools.
I don't know exactly what the parameters are around that, but that's something we'll take back as a suggestion that we look at.
And so and then last follow-up, Madam Chair, related to that, so has there been any conversation about allocating related to attendance or a cap per school to ensure that the larger public schools don't suck all the money from that $7 million?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know there is a desire to spread this money as much as possible. We've actually created the reason the $7 million is based on a ratio between the private schools and the public schools in our state. And that's why it's $7 million. So I think we'll be able to spread that pretty well. But I think it is something that we want to make sure is done as equitably as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to talk about the $7 million for private schools. I was wondering if you could just provide us with a few comments on the advantages and the disadvantages of providing money in this public safety investments for private schools, and also tell us whether this budget includes recurring funding for private schools, or whether you would see funding for school safety for private schools in future budgets.
This funding is non-recurring, and it's for private schools. And I've now forgotten what your first question was. I went through that.
I guess just you're thinking about the advantages and disadvantages of starting to provide this kind of funding for private schools, and then whether it's going to be in future budgets or whether there's recurring funding for that in this budget.
It's a good question. I appreciate that. I don't know that we have any plans at this point for future budgets. That's why we made this non-recurring. And I think I understand your question about private schools. The reality is that this last issue was in a private school, and we felt like that there is a need to be able to provide some support there. And there's probably a lot more went into that, but I think it was as much of an effort to make sure that our children are safe no matter what school that they are in, and do the best we can there.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairman Zachary asked the question I was going to, but I want to expand on what our Homeland Security conversation was, and since he has left this desk, he can answer this later. We are looking at a substantial number of new Homeland Security officers. We're talking about identifying in-school issues and school-related issues. Are we also looking at general population concerns, which is what occurred a few days ago? I want to make sure that we're also looking across the board, not just at in-school issues, but also out-of-school issues. I'm seeing a head being nodded as we do that, as you answer that. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and thank you all for being here. And I know we're dwelling a lot on school safety, and I think rightfully so. The one thing I guess I'm worried about, well, let me ask a question. So the $20 million that has been in the budgets in the past for the school safety grants, how much has been spent out of that $20 million? That may be for Director Thurman. I don't know if.
We'll get you that information.
Because
we don't have it with us.
My understanding is that $20 million has not all been expended. And so we're going to add $7 million more dollars. And that sounds like a lot of money. It really does. And I wish Director Mays was still up here. But what I want you to understand is I don't think when these folks, these agents get in these school districts that they realize the shortcomings to a lot of these schools. $27 million will not touch the needs for many of these schools. I'm talking from doors to windows to, I mean, you name it, from security systems to software to, I mean, to monitoring to, I mean, the filtering, it just goes on and on. So I think that's one thing we have to be very cognizant of, and your agents are going to be doing that, Director Mays, and I don't mean to talk to you when you're back there, but I think that's one thing that you guys are going to be, I hope you're ready for that, because a lot of this is going to be finding out the shortcomings from these schools, and $27 million is not going to do it. $7 million non-recurring, that's not going to be a drop in the bucket once these guys get in there and we find out what all these schools need. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I guess that's where I'm coming from. I don't think, I wish we'd have put a little more emphasis maybe on that pot of money. And I think that $20 million being left over, not being spent out of the budgets in the past, tells us that we're not doing a very good job of making sure LEAs know what they can purchase out of that. So we've got to do a better job. And I know I see the commissioner back there, Commissioner Long, and the director, and we've talked about this a little bit. But I mean, as far as schools go, I think monitoring software and those filtering, if it's not included that they can purchase out of this fund, my goodness, whatever we got to do to make sure they can. Because that's how we're going to catch a lot of these, and I'm going to tell you, I see it every day. I get emails being the director of technology back in my school district. You would not believe the emails that I get. And it's if they're doing something in my school district on a computer, on our network, it tells me. Mm-hmm. And then I contact my SRO, my principal, my assistant principal. They go immediately and find out what's going on. And that's from a search, that's from a hit. But so I want to make sure that we understand that that's where a lot of these problems are going to be curtailed in the school system, is going to be doing it right there on the front end. I'm we all are passionate about this. We all care about this. And so we just want to make sure that we do everything we can, but I hope we lay it all on the table, whatever we can do to make sure that we make these schools much safer. And I appreciate the effort that you all have. This is a big task. These agents are going to be coming in. My goodness. I mean, I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know how they're going to do it in Hancock County with three schools. I can imagine a Williamson County. But I certainly appreciate you all taking on the task, and I'm certainly ready to get to work to help you all do whatever we need to do. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair, lady, and thank you all for what we are trying to do here. And in reference to the budget request, you know, I can support 140 million, 500 million, however many millions of dollars if we can save a life of our children. You know, I mean, you take Miss Hale, who actually fired 152 rounds in that short period. And the video shows where she comes in and she blows the doors out. The question, did SRO or Homeland Security, we know local law enforcement responded, and they responded quickly. Was SRO or Homeland Security anywhere at that point?
In the recent tragedy here in
Yes,
Nashville?
at Covington Christian Covenant, yes, school.
I'm not that familiar with it. My understanding is they did not have an SRO.
And then I think if my memory and reading serve me correctly, the parents of Audrey Hale had said they didn't want her to have any guns, but she had one gun, but they didn't have no idea she was accumulating more guns. How do we put more resources and money in just take that as an example? Could we prevented that?
I think we all ask ourselves that question. You know, one of the things I'll say is that when I started, I said we've done 6 of the last 7 years. We've had proposals, we've passed proposals to increase school safety in our state. I think we'll be working on this for some time to come. I don't know that this will be the last thing that we will do. I think we'll be working on this going forward.
And Madam Chair, just to follow up on Chairman Hicks, he's absolutely right. We need to put more money in this. It's not the question of how much money. It's exactly what we're going to do with these resources. And I go all the way back to, is it anything we could have done or we can do, let's say with the parent or the parents of Audrey Hale, if we had known anything, because at that point, the parent even knew that my daughter should not have access to weapons. They knew that.
Representative Miller,
We
I
didn't know
think, I think we all are as frustrated as you about our lack of ability and the fact that this tragedy happened, that it wasn't prevented. But I don't think that the commissioner, and we're here to talk about the budget today, and I don't think that it's fair to expect the commissioner to have those answers at this point. I think we are all struggling to find answers and to find steps that we can take that will make a difference. They'll make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think there's just a lot of discussion to be had about what those steps are. We certainly can start with making our schools safer. And I just would like to underscore what Chairman Hicks said in terms of technology. There are things out there that are available that help. We cannot know what's in the mind of every child, much less every citizen walking the streets. But there are things that can be monitored that can give us a clue. And so whatever we can do to make sure that we're availing ourselves of all of those technologies, I think it's important that we do that. I have one last questioner on my list, and then we need to get some finance work done today on some bills. So Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And as I'm listening here and we see that Homeland Security will be, expanding into our schools more, Madam Chairman, I think it would be wonderful if they could give us a report annually to your office and to the Education Committee so that we can understand the issues that they identify and investigate and even outcomes, a statistical report, so that we can understand, how this money is helping, but also what are the issues that our children are facing in school. Would it be possible to add that to an amendment?
I'm assuming that the Department of Safety and Homeland Security would have that sort of information. They could compile it in some way that would be protect private data that needed to be protected and could share with us. So we'll ask them to do that. Thank you. Commissioner, thank you for your presence today. There's a lot of information in the original budget, a lot more information to digest in this one, and we thank you for making the presentation and helping us to understand. But I think for anyone watching at home or anywhere else, one thing is clear. We are serious about education. We are serious about school safety, and we are taking steps to make sure that we can improve that. We don't want any child to go to school and feel unsafe there. So, and we have a long way to go to make that happen. I think we all recognize that as well. But every journey starts with the first step, and we're certainly taking more than one here with this budget. So thank you. And with that, we are back in session. Item 1 on our calendar is House Bill 921 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, who has waited patiently. Thank you, Speaker. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you,
Speaker
Madam
Marsh,
Chairman.
sorry, I demoted you. I didn't mean to.
HB 921 increases the amount in state law that the manager of a municipal or county electric system or energy authority can purchase without board approval from $50,000 to $100,000. Local utility boards and city councils still have to take action to increase the amount for their individual electric system, which some municipal electric systems currently have limits below 50,000. So what we're letting them do is move up from 50 to 100 before they have to have board approval. And this should help in buying products and materials that are escalating rapidly. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Speaker Marsh. Do we have any questions? Question has been called. Without objection, we are voting on House Bill 921. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 921 goes to calendar and rules. Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized on House Bill 191. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Holtzclaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. HB 191, I think we have 3 amendments to add to the bill. Is that correct?
Actually, I believe we have 4, Chairman Holtzclaw.
Okay.
Amendment number 1 I have is 006054.
Right, that's the original we started with, yes.
We have a motion and a second. Any objections? Seeing none, we're voting on Amendment 1. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Amendment 1 is attached to the bill. We're now looking at Amendment 2, drafting code 007098.
That's correct.
We have a motion and a second. Chairman Holtzclaw.
That is correct.
Okay. All right, we are voting on, without objection, voting on Amendment 007098. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. 7098 is now part of the bill. Amendment 3, drafting code 7116.
That's
We have a
correct.
motion on the amendment, and we have a second. We are, without objection, voting on Amendment 007116. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. 007116 is now traveling with the bill. Amendment 4, drafting code 006482. We have
That
a
is
motion,
correct.
we have a second. We are voting on House Bill or House Amendment 006482 to House Bill 191. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. All four amendments are now attached. We are back on House Bill 191 as amended. And I would ask that Legal Services, just for future committee and floor action, that we roll all of these
Please,
four
into one.
amendments into one.
You did a
And-
fine job, Chair Lady.
Chairman Husklaw, do you have anything you'd like to add about this bill?
No, basically, it's just the premier omnibus bill, which identifies, unique locations to serve alcoholic beverage on premises only. That's what the bill does.
Questions be called. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 191. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. If you'd like to be recorded as a no, please see the clerk. We are now on item 3,
Thank you,
House
Chair Lady.
Bill 137. Thank you, Chairman Husklaw. House Bill 137 by Chairman Howell. We have a motion and a second. And we have 2 amendments, I believe, on this bill. Chairman Howell?
That's correct, Madam Chairman. Amendment 7090 is what?
Amendment 1 I have is 006739.
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of attaching 006739 to the bill, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is attached. Amendment 2, I have drafting code 007090.
That's correct.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of attaching 007090 to House Bill 137, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. We are now back on House Bill 137 as amended, and as before, I'm going to ask that Legal Services roll those amendments, 2 amendments into one.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Chairman Howell, would you like to tell us what this bill does now that
Okay.
we've amended it?
Yes, this is the annual transportation omnibus bill for specialty license plates.
Are there any questions of the sponsor? Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 137. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 137 goes to calendar and rules. Thank you, Chairman Howell.
Thank you.
And I believe you have our next item as well. House Bill 138, we have a motion and a second. And we have an amendment on this bill as well. The drafting code I show is 006615.
That's correct.
We have a motion, the second on the amendment. Without objection, we are voting on the amendment. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is attached. We are now back on the bill as amended. Chairman Howell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the annual transportation omnibus bill for the naming of roads and bridges in town.
You've heard the explanation or the questions of the sponsor. Seeing none, we're voting on House Bill 138. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 138 goes to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you,
Chair and
Chairman.
Committee.
Item number 5, House Bill 312 by Chairman Littleton. Chairman Littleton, you're recognized. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Littleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Lady Chair. This is the adoption process modernization that's brought to me by the Department of Children's Services. This bill helps modernize DCS adoption process in 3 different ways. First, the bill corrects the recent Court of Appeals decision misinterpreting when a court may find that the grounds of persistent conditions exist in order to terminate parental rights. Second, the bill corrects the modernize practices related to the release and maintenance of adoption records. And finally, the statute requires courts conducting adoption proceedings to send adoption records to DCS at various stages of the adoption process.
All right, you've heard the sponsor's explanation. Do we have questions? Seeing the question has been called, so we are without objection voting on House Bill 312. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 312 moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Lady Chair and Committee.
Item number 6 on our calendar, that's been asked to be rolled 1 week, so without objection, rolled 1 week. That brings us to item 7, House Bill 632 by Representative Darby. We have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Representative Darby, I believe we have an amendment on your bill,
Yes, ma'am.
007148.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
I have a motion and a second on the amendment. Without objection, we are voting on amendment 007148. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. 007148 is attached to the bill. We are now back on the bill as amended. Representative Darby, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill authorizes Henry County to participate in a pilot project to use convenient voting centers for local and state elections.
You've heard the sponsor's explanation. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 632. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? If you'd like to be recorded as a no, please see the clerk. But House Bill 632 did pass and goes on to calendar and rules. So thank you, Representative Darby.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We are out of time. Fortunately, we were able to get through the bills for those of us who do not serve on the committee. We will all be back here next week, same time. So we will have an opportunity to hear our bills at that point. So without objection, all bills not heard today on the calendar will be rolled 1 week. Thank you. We are adjourned unless someone objects.